Welcome to Kicking the Rear podcast. My name is Joe Yarshin. Today I have a special episode. We're going to be interviewing our first guest, Mr. Jason Hilbelink. He is a highly successful realtor in the Middle Tennessee market. He works with Parks Realty, and this guy's got great energy, very comprehensive, awesome analytical realtor with lots of real-time experience. And I'm honored to have him on the podcast today. Jason's a former teacher, and he moved to the area in about 2009. And he has a family, 3 kids, and just a really wholesome individual. Love having his perspective on today's crazy market. So without further ado, I'd love to get into this interview. All right, welcome in, guys. So today on the Kick in the Rear podcast, I have Jason Hilbelink. Welcome in, Jason. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Joe. Thanks so much for having me on. Super excited to talk a little bit about real estate and to be a part of your platform here. Love listening and hearing a little bit more about investments.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the audience, just so you know, I met Jason through my colleague, Tony, and when I was moving to Tennessee, I asked Tony, I'm like, hey, do you know anybody good in this space that can help me, find my primary residence? And, certainly he recommended Jason, and he's like, I think he's going to be a good fit for your personality. And so I met Jason, and honestly, I was blown away from a service standpoint. He was very polished and knowledgeable and analytical, but beyond that, he was just very personable and made me feel comfortable in my home buying experience. And, ultimately that's why I wanted to choose Jason for the first interview, because, I'm honored that he said yes, but also he's just a professional in this space. And I think his perspective on the Middle Tennessee market is going to be very, it's going to be very good for the average investor to hear, just so that they can know what to expect. So without further ado, I got some questions for you. So in our previous conversation, you actually mentioned that before becoming a realtor, you for 2 years, you specialized in an area of real estate, working in land acquisition for an infill developer. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so it was an opportunity that came up where I had a realtor in Middle Tennessee who specialized in infill. And infill was a term that I wasn't super familiar with in that area of life that I was in at the time. And so infill is really just taking a need for higher density in some of these urban areas, identifying key properties where you may have an opportunity to increase the density. So you may be able to take a single family home that's on a double lot, and instead of having a single family home, you may be able to, if it's a tear down candidate, you may be able to put 2 homes on that one lot. It's a really specific type of real estate that he was specializing in, and needed some help really looking at mapping and looking at the greater Nashville area and helping to target some of these properties to really expedite some things. And so had an opportunity to learn a ton from him in that experience. I learned a ton about the city of Nashville, about how real estate works, about how land gets developed, the process that goes through, and was really, really fortunate to be in that setting, to be coached by him. And really, I think it serves a great purpose in Nashville, because it allows for the growth that's necessary. We see some of these areas as they're really popular, and housing is just not always available that people are looking for. And it allows for folks to be able to move into these areas in sometimes brand new construction homes. City enjoys it because there's an obvious property tax benefit to it as well. But just really is using the land in the best way possible and helping grow the city in a responsible way, in a way that really reflects each individual community. And it was an awesome experience to go through, and really just kind of got me started down this path of real estate and looking at how can we serve people in the best way possible.
Well, that was a very comprehensive answer, and you definitely hit the nail on the head there. Because I wanted to ask how you got in as a realtor, and it sounds like that was a good transition job for you, or at least getting in the real estate space. So was that kind of the was that the underlying reason or motivation that got you interested in becoming a realtor? Or tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, Joe, thanks. I've always loved helping people. And I feel like that's, something that I really always want to come through in the work that I do. Regardless of what phase of my life I was in, it's always been really core to who I am. It's what's brought me happiness. It's just helping people. And real estate was just a great opportunity to help people navigate through something that sometimes feels big. Sometimes it feels intimidating, feels like there's a lot of uncertainty to it. And I loved being able to come in alongside of people there and help them out. Because at the end of the day, regardless of what type of real estate we're talking about, it can be life-changing. Owning something, the pride that comes along with it, the way that it can just change the direction of your life is really something that I love being a part of. It was something that I was fortunate enough to experience early on in my adult life. And being able to see that value and the importance that it had, I just love being that small little bit of somebody's story and a part of that journey towards a goal that real estate oftentimes helps them achieve. And again, that falls into a lot of areas of real estate. But I feel like for me early on, having my own home was huge. And so I've been fortunate enough to have some real seasoned veterans in real estate teach me, coach me, giving me that extra level of motivation that I knew that when I was stepping into this work, I had a confidence behind me that I knew the steps that we were going to be walking through, and was fortunate enough to be able to take that right into practice with my clients.
That's very interesting. You mentioned like coaching, you talking about your prior role, even before the real estate, you were a teacher. So, what importance does that play? Having that perspective of education and learning, like, how did that help you, in that space? Like, it sounds like you were a teacher, you were teaching others, but then you became the student in a way. So, tell me how that kind of perspective uniquely shaped you in the real estate space.
Yeah, it never felt like I ever really took my teaching hat off. Being in the education world, you were always learning, you were always adapting, you had to always be consuming in order to be the best that you can be in your classroom. And I feel like as I moved out of education into full-time real estate, I didn't really feel like it was a big shift in my world, because I still needed to consume. I still needed to learn. I still needed to adapt. Every day is something different. And I feel like the experience I had as an educator has really helped propel me as a real estate agent, because there's a lot of times where I say some things and I kind of get bogged down in some of the jargon of real estate. And I have this look on my client's face where they're just like, you can just tell that did not land the way that I thought it was going to. And so I kind of come back from it from a different angle. And especially first-time home buyers, trying to help somebody understand, here's your mortgage payment. We've got principal and interest. We've got property taxes, and helping them understand all that. Then we move over to closing costs. We'll talk about why there's fixed and why there's prepaids. There's so much of teaching that I still rely on. And I hope it makes me a better student, because it's something that I've had to always be a part of. But I also hope that it comes through for my clients, that, I'm kind of there to advocate and help make sure they understand, because there's a lot to move through. And I definitely feel like my educational world experience has helped me in this area as well.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that perspective, because, as a buyer, you helped our family transition over, and there's so much we didn't know about Tennessee. And I think you did a really great job utilizing that skill in your tool belt. Batman's got a tool for everything. And, you're just pulling out this teachable moment where, I might not know about the lay of the land, but like you taught us about even just like something so simple as like, there's no basements really in Tennessee because of the clay, or like, simple things you just don't even think of like that. And you're educating us on, what to expect. And it gives us a little bit more of that comfortable at ease feeling when we're doing this process. So, as a client, I've saw the benefit of you being a teacher is you really made it easy for us. And, you gave us that confidence in the buying process. So, I certainly see the value of your skill set being a former teacher. Like, that's so awesome. And I really appreciate that in your line of work. So, if I could switch gears here for a minute, as a buyer and a seller, is there anything you're seeing in Middle Tennessee? Like, what type of trends is going on here in the market? Or if you could give us like an overall temperature of the market from your perspective as a realtor.
Yeah. Well, it's been quite a ride. I feel like for the past 18 months, we went from a period of so much uncertainty in early 2020. I can remember having conversations with buyers that were under contract in March, April of 2020, where there was just so much uncertainty, and they contemplated walking away from deals just because they felt like the world is about to implode, the market could change. And fortunately, I didn't have anybody, but I know there were probably some that did. But there was so much uncertainty in 2020. And then we slid into this just white hot seller's market where there was just a frenzy to buying in Middle Tennessee. And then we hit kind of Q2 of 2020 of this year, and we've experienced another shift. And I think you can probably associate that to a number of factors as to what caused the shift. I don't think it's one in particular. I think the big one that's grabbing the headlines that everybody's talking about, probably that rapid change in interest rates caused us to really see another shift occur. And that's the one that we're living through right now. And I think we're experiencing a very different market for both buyers and for sellers.
So you mentioned that rate hike. Do you think the collective psychology is still kind of in this doom and gloom, like, hey, I don't want to buy right now because the rates are so high? Or what's your perspective on that specifically?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways that people can consume information. They can listen to headlines. They can read the ticker at the bottom of a screen. They can ask their neighbor who has nothing to do with real estate, what their feelings are. But for me, I love data. I think data is super important in this specific discussion because it gives an accurate perspective on things. There's no arguing when it comes to the data. And our market right now has really normalized. I think the reality of 2020 was that it really distorted a lot of how people viewed real estate in Middle Tennessee. So knowing what the real estate world looked like prior to 2020, I think is an advantage that a lot of agents who've been in it prior to, this last year, like I have, I think it helps us highlight to buyers and sellers what the market feels like. And to me right now, it feels a whole lot more like 2018, where we really had a relatively balanced market. We had interest rates that were kind of hovering high fours, low fives. And I feel like that's kind of, if I can hopefully, pull out my crystal ball, that's where we're headed back to again. But from a statistics standpoint, active listings in September of 2022 to September of 2018 is almost identical. They're within a couple of hundred when we look at kind of the greater 5-county area of Middle Tennessee. Closings are almost identical for the last 6 months. Our consumption rate is a little bit different because I do feel like we have more buyers present today than what we did in 2018. And so those are the things that I come back to. I come back to the data of like, hey, we're just kind of normalizing here. And having great lender partners, I feel like is a huge part of it, because for me, having lenders that I know and trust that I can push buyers back to is really helpful, because then I can let the professionals speak to, if you're uncertain about interest rates, if that's the one item that I can identify, hey, let's talk to somebody. Let's see what options you may have. There's some competitive jumbo loan products out there that are really enticing. There are lenders that are using this phrase, you marry the house, but you date your interest rate.
Oh, man, I love that quote. Can you say that again for our listeners?
Yeah, so the idea that you marry the house, but you are dating your interest rate. The idea that your interest rate is not something that you're stuck with. And you're never stuck with a house. You can always sell it, but sure, you're committed to that home. But the idea that hey, this is what I closed at, this is what I'm going to be at forever for the 30 years of it. That's a misconception that we're trying to break away from, that while interest rates are higher than what you may want right now, 3-4 months from now, 5 months from now, 3 years from now, they may look very different, and you have the opportunity to change that. And I think that that's an important piece to insert into the conversation so that it kind of gets some buyers off the fence, because there are some opportunities right now in a somewhat normalized market for buyers to really get in and get into a home that they feel confident about.
Wow. What a really thought out answer. I appreciate the feedback on that. I think you're absolutely dead on with kind of how you're educating and how you're positioning your clients to kind of take away some of their biggest objections in the buying space. It sounds like, a lot of people's fear is the interest rates. Well, hey, if that's the biggest concern you have, let's have you talk to a reputable lender, somebody that's going to talk you through the rates so that you understand what the actual rates are in your unique situation. And it's not going to be the same for every single person. Jumbo loans are way different than your FHA loans and doctor loans and construction loans. So their unique goals are going to have to reflect that purchase and product, and the rate is a big part of it. So it sounds like you're kind of taking away that concern by giving them resources via the lenders and others to kind of just talk them through their concerns and kind of put them at ease so that they can still take advantage of this space where they might have a little more leverage as a buyer now because of all these other factors of some of their competitive competition's gone. I've been hearing that a lot in my circles is like, a lot of leverage is going back to the buyer. So
I think you're absolutely right. I think that the leverage is moving back to kind of that neutral position, and so I feel like what it actually looks like, boots on the ground right now, is buyers shopping with a little bit more confidence. Once we're able to identify and address a concern, and we get them house shopping again, they shop with more confidence. They're able to negotiate right now. I'm talking about, from some first-time home buyers who closing costs, that makes all the difference in them being able to get into a home or not. And we're back in a market where we can negotiate for some closing cost assistance. We get to have inspections and repairs. We get to have appraisal contingencies that actually matter again. And I just feel like there's a benefit. We see inventory back on the rise again here, and more homes just mean more choices. You can get a chance to breathe. You can enjoy the process a little bit more, and you can really make a calculated decision. I think that makes a buyer have a level of confidence in what they're buying.
So kind of tying to that, like specifically for a property investor, not necessarily like a primary residence, like do you see that being an advantage now for an investor in that space, given the market conditions, given all those things you just said? Like, how is this going to help the average investor in their negotiations, in their acquisition process?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, is to look at how is this impacting the other buyers in our market right now. And I've had this conversation as most recently as last week, where I've have some out-of-state buyers who know the value of the Middle Tennessee rental market, and they really want to get on these long-term investments, and revisiting conversations with them about what our market looks like right now. There's inventory that's been sitting for 45, 60 days. And there's an opportunity there for investors to kind of get back into a market where their model now works, where they aren't having to get into this over asking price competition. Because if there's one thing that I know in working with investors is that there are hurdles, there are things that really kill valuations. And one of those is paying more for a property than what it's worth. If this is a kind of a business mindset, the last thing that you want to do is kind of overextend yourself just to acquire a property.
Wow.
And I feel like for investors right now, the opportunity is back there to get something fair market value and really start to build their portfolios back up again, because the opportunities are there. And we are still seeing a rise in rental rates. And so I think that the two together now are really producing some great opportunities for investors to jump back in here and really start to build up those portfolios.
So it sounds like, based on what you're saying, it might be a perfect storm for investors, because of those rental rates going up. If they already have properties that are buy and hold, they're going to be benefiting from this shift. And then in the same idea, they're going to be able to purchase things closer to that market value, like you said, or even maybe under, depending on the distress of the seller. So those are all very good points you made. Certainly, the audience I'm trying to target is for investors. So like having that unique perspective, and you said you had out of town investors or out of state investors. That's something a lot of people talk about. Are you able to help those buyers transition to Tennessee, or is it mostly like they're looking to purchase investment properties in Tennessee? Or can you elaborate on that just a little bit more?
Yeah, and I think, Joe, one of the things I love about your podcast is I believe it's really focusing on a type of real estate that's a time-proven strategy. It helps people develop alternative income streams. It contributes to financial security. And the folks that are attracted to this world of real estate are not necessarily confined just to their own zip codes, their own, locations. I think that they're following a national conversation about, where is my money going to be utilized best? Where are my rental valuations continue to increase? Where are, property values going to be at a competitive spot where I can make sure that my property is going to cash flow the way that I need it to? And so I think when I'm working with these investors from out of state, it's really about dialing in, listening to those specific needs. What are they looking for? Are they looking for something that they're going to be holding these properties for long periods of time? Because the one thing that is a conversation often in Middle Tennessee is the attractiveness of short-term rental properties, which is a totally different world in so many ways. But looking at long-term investments, helping them understand, again, here comes that teaching hat, because if you're calling from another state, you probably aren't aware that Middle Tennessee and the Nashville area has one of the most recruited teaching hospitals in the country at Vanderbilt University. And so we've got residents and fellows that are coming to that portion of the city, so that's a great opportunity there. If you're looking for a tenant who, is probably not home a lot, and is probably going to be low risk, low demand, that's an area that maybe we want to target. So again, helping them understand a little bit about the dynamics of the greater Nashville area. I think that's what you've got to have is you got to have somebody, if you're not going to physically be here, you got to have somebody who knows the market that you're looking at, that understands, how you're thinking, knows the key terms, knows the phrases, and is someone who, is able to already be talking to those to best utilize their time. This is, at the end of the day, it's a lot of time invested in something, and you got to have somebody who's in your corner there helping you prioritize it as much as possible.
Oh man, I love that. You kind of mentioned boots on the ground earlier. That's a good synopsis. You have somebody there that just knows the area. They kind of know what they're doing. They know the temperature. They can, know what your unique goals are. And certainly in this space, you'd mentioned these fellows and doctors. In the lending space, we specialize in doctor loans. So that's an area of opportunity for us as lenders. But you have all these migration patterns and people coming into the state and moving from some of these other, politically differing than some of the laws here. And, you can read between the lines on that. But certainly the people are moving here still at high rates. So that plays a big part as well. I appreciate all of your perspective on that. I do want to switch gears here though, and talk to you a little bit about, being a realtor and, as an investor, what would be a good idea for a property investor, to do when they're searching for a reputable realtor? You kind of touched on a lot of these things earlier, but is there a specific question, as a realtor, Jason, would you ask somebody if you were looking for somebody to help you? What types of things would you ask them?
Yeah. So I think And I use this question often when I'm talking with people, is that I always tell them, you want a real estate agent who's an agent every single day. This is a really hard job. It's a job that demands a lot. And you want somebody who this is their full-time job every single day. You want somebody who's going to be grinding it out, networking, and helping serve your needs as best they can every single day.
So your part-time, if I could interrupt you, so your part-time realtor might not be the best fit for an investment portfolio, huh?
I'm simply sharing my experience that I know the time that I devote to my investor clients and my craft.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel like there's an aspect of that demands more time than what may be allowed if you're trying to multitask with different careers and professions. And so I do think that that's an important one. Is this what you do all day, every day? Is this your full-time job? Because I think there's a motivation there. There's an excitement and an engagement, a knowledge base more than anything else that's critical there. And so I do think it's a fair question to ask. If you're in that interview process, I do think it's a fair question to ask. I do think it's also important to ask, have you worked with investors before? They need somebody who understands what their goals are. An agent who works primarily, an agent who works primarily with somebody who just helps people buy their primary homes, they could help you as an investor. And obviously, if your cousin or whatever, everybody has their reasons for why. But at the end of the day, it isn't necessarily going to be the best option for you. And so I think that's something too that's going to be important. And I also think it's important for them to ask, how do you prepare before we go see a property? What is the preparation that you've done? What have you already looked at before we meet at this property? Because there are so many things. What are the comps in the area? What are the rental comps in the area? How many days on average is it going to take to rent this place? What's the concentration of rentals in the area? That may be a concern or a benefit. I mean, it could go either way. What are some of the hurdles in this community that might hurt my valuation? Does it have a high HOA? Is there a special assessment coming that I may not be aware of? Are there rental permits required? Is there a cap in the neighborhood? Those are all things that I think have to be considered. And really an agent who's doing the work of this daily, working alongside investors, that's just going to become part of it's just a part of their Rolodex. They just are going to be moving through that the entire time. So that when we come to a property, I know I've done my due diligence on the front end to make sure I'm prioritizing your time and bringing you a quality listing that's checked the boxes. So I think those are all big parts of that interview process. You want to make sure that you've got somebody who knows what they're doing.
Wow. That's an awesome take on that. So just to reiterate, some of those questions again were, hey, is this your full-time gig? Is like, how long have you been doing this? Have you worked with investors before? I think those are, if you only ask those two questions, I think you're going to weed out a lot of the I would say not bad realtors, but the ones that aren't a good fit for your goals. Am I right on saying that?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
Okay. So yeah. And it's funny, you kind of answered another one of my questions already, that I wanted to ask you, but I can kind of tie it back into, you started talking about like some of the preparation involved for a realtor, what goes into that. And you can kind of see based on those level of preparation, like what their, success rate probably is. So in your opinion, what differentiates a successful realtor from an unsuccessful realtor in your Middle Tennessee market?
Yeah, and I think it comes back to that very first question I started with. If this is your full-time job, it requires a lot to be successful.
Yeah,
I've been around some extremely successful agents in my career. I've talked about how I've had some very veteran agents plug into me and invest in my success. I've gained valuable skills from that. I would say one of the important things that I've really gathered from that is reading. I've always been impressed, the amount of time that they took just reading and reading news articles from reputable real estate news services. I think that's huge. This is not just reading the headline on your local newspaper. This is plugging into local market insights. So reading news from reputable real estate news services, looking at data.
Can I put you on the spot with that? Is there
absolutely.
one, do you have a go-to source that you like? You look at it and you're like, okay, this is reputable. This is a good baseline source of information. It doesn't have to necessarily be specific, but like to get a general a general pulse of the area. Is there one you that you look at or that you're familiar with?
Yeah, I think one of the best ones that I can always recommend to real estate colleagues is Inman. Inman is a paid subscription, but what the value you get for what you invest into it is extremely high. You're getting a national perspective a lot of times. You're getting local perspectives, but I do think that Inman is one in terms of the industry. They are near the top in terms of the quality of information that they put out there. So it's one that I always plug to people because of the quality of what they're putting out.
Okay, I appreciate that. And if I could kind of, piggyback off of your last sentiment about being successful versus unsuccessful realtor, if I could put you on the spot, like what's something unique about you, Jason, that you do for your clients that maybe the average realtor wouldn't do, or maybe that, again, something you do that other realtors do, but it's something that you personalize or you make a great experience for your client?
Yeah, I would phrase it this way. I had an agent that I know, and she described a skill that helps agents be successful. And I feel like it was a discussion we were kind of having together. But she described it this way. She said, great agents anticipate and answer questions before a client even knows that they have that question.
Wow.
And I love that idea of being one step ahead and always thinking about your client's needs, their goals. Because in a real estate transaction, problems will arise. They always do. Joe, you and I know that they will. You see it in your world. I see it in my world, and they could really hinder things. But being prepared is something that I always try to do, so that when I come to a client, my conversation with them is not, hey, client, we have a problem.
Houston, we have a problem.
That never lands well, because immediately the alarm goes off. Versus the contrast of how I come to a conversation. Be ready to say, we had an issue come up, but we do have some options here. And then talking them through the options, educating them, and allowing them to make the decision that best is fitting for them. I think that's something that I really try to do. Rather than just presenting a problem, I want to present a problem and options.
I love that because I think you're right. Even if you have a perfect situation, there's still going to be something that goes wrong. And you being able to anticipate potential problems before there are problems and educating them before they have the question is critical. But like having the preparation to have options to propose solutions to those problems is so critical. Like, once you have a problem, okay, that's one thing, but how do we fix the problem is the next thing. And if you already have that lined up, you're going to reassure that client like, hey, I know shit just hit the fan. Excuse my language, but and when poop hits the fan, I got a solution for you ready to go because I've seen this before, or I've encountered something similar in my experience. And, you mentioned you've been in the industry 4.5 years now. So you've kind of seen your fair share of both problems and responding to those unique problems. So I think that's awesome that you do that for your clients. And then, certainly as a buyer, we can appreciate that. But,
Yeah. And I think the other thing too, in an industry like this, there's a lot of public perception of our world that we operate in. There's TV shows, there's the news stories, there's just kind of this, image I feel like that people have in their head. And I think at the end of the day, whether you want to call it successful, whether you want to call it, something that differentiates me from others, but I think, what are you focused on? What brings you to work every day? Is it simply sales? Because if it's simply sales, there's a high level of burnout, because there are seasons, there are ups and downs to this market, to this world that we live in. And if it's just sales, it's just not going to be something that you want to stay in. If it's relationships, if it's because you care about the people that you get to help along the way, I feel like that's something that brings a different level of success. And I think that that's something that I try to build into who I am and how I operate in this world, is that, this to me is as much about the relationships as it is anything else.
Totally dead on. I mean, as a lender, this business is all about relationships. That's probably one of the takeaways I have from working with Tony, the top producer of the company I work for. This is a relationship business. People talk. You can do all the marketing in the world. You can do all the paid advertisements you want, but this is a people business. People talk, and you know, when you do right by your client, they're gonna refer you business. They're gonna take care of you. And it's been a pleasure working with you, from a personal standpoint, but it's I got this, I'm gonna point out something unique. I'm gonna toot your own horn here for a second. When I first met you, beyond the negative of being a Packer fan, just kidding. You showed us a visual packet of all the information of the day ahead. So you gave us the blueprint of the day. You set the table. You gave us expectations for the day. So you guided us through this plan, and you had a booklet with visual representations, statistics, pictures of the property, and that might be a common thing for successful realty companies, but individually, you knew those stats backwards and forwards. You didn't even have to look at it. You knew it from memory. And I think that, that's how I knew you were the real deal, Jason, I'm like, this guy gets it. He knows his material. He prepared. He knows what's up. And I felt at ease because I'm like, you know what? I feel respected that he took the time to actually do this for us. So I just wanted to point that out there. I thought that was something really unique about you.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. I absolutely love what I get to do. I love connecting with people. I love that every single day I wake up and I may meet somebody that day that when I woke up, I had no idea who they were. And, fast forward a couple of months and all of a sudden there's somebody that I talk to on the regular. And so I love what I get to do and what that means. But you're right. I think at the end of the day, I want to make sure that the passion that I have for what I do kind of comes through. And a lot of that's in the preparation that I put in that helps me serve people better. And I feel like that's something that I've learned, something that's been coached to me as well. We call it being referral worthy. So in an industry where referrals matter so much.
Life and death.
Worthy. Yeah. It's you're kind of living with that mentality that you just kind of want to be treated the way that you would hope to be treated. So, it's fun. It is, it's a wild ride sometimes, but it's super exciting work that we get to be a part of.
Well, hey, Jason, I think this has been a very awesome, deliberation, and you really gave us a unique perspective on what's going on in the market and kind of how you treat clients and how the right way to treat clients as a realtor is. And that was the purpose of this interview. I wanted to get a realtor perspective so that investors can have a better idea of what to expect, in this market, but also who they should be working with. Because it's, I just read this book recently, and this is kind of a preview to the next episode, but who, not how. Who is so critical in this business, and leveraging the right people to get to your goals, especially in investing, super critical. So to end on this, Jason, what's the best way that buyers and sellers can get a hold of you to, discuss their unique goals, whether it's investing, primary residence? How can we get a hold of you, Jason?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I'm really centered right here, Middle Tennessee, Greater Nashville area, Williamson County. I spend a lot of my time in Williamson counties in terms of residential work. Investment work kind of takes me into Rutherford, Murfreesboro, into Nashville. So all of those markets are ones that are within my wheelhouse. You can find me on Instagram, Jason H. the Realtor, Facebook, LinkedIn. You can find my website, jasonhilbelink.com, or you can just simply call or text me. 615-920-2943 is the best way to get a hold of me. My email address is going to be on the website, jasonh@parksathome.com. There's really no pressure in it. I think what I love to do is I just love to be able to talk about what I get to do, talk about if we're going to be a good fit together. And so if you've got questions about buying, selling, if you're thinking about the investment game, and what that might look like for you. I love having those conversations and timing that out right now with some buyers as well. So feel free, hit me up with any questions. I would love to continue the dialogue with anyone.
All right. Well, hey, thanks again, Jason. You've been great, and looking forward to talking to you soon, and maybe we can have you on for a follow-up episode.
There we go. Thanks, Joe.
All right.
I love what you're doing here. Keep up the great work.
Take care. Thanks, Jason.
All right, bye.